So last weekend, Kevin and I were in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I've never been there. Lived in Michigan 30 years, but never went to the UP. And we were there for a family wedding. Kevin's niece was getting married. And on Friday, we went on a couple of hikes. And one of the hikes was to the top of what is called Sugarloaf Mountain. And they said, when you get up to the top, you're going to be able to see just a panoramic view. And it was beautiful. It was this series of steps and a lot of platforms like that and steps. And then I got kind of fascinated with all the steps and all the wood in the forest and all these steps that we took to get to the top. And then that's one of the platforms on the top. And then when you get to the very top, that's the view from one angle. But it was just stunningly beautiful. So we're walking down the stairs, and there's this big pole. We hadn't gone down very far. And it says, easy trail, difficult trail. So we decided, well, we're from Colorado now. We're going to take the difficult trail. So we did. We took and you know, when you hike here, it wasn't all that difficult, really. Not to, knock Michigan at all, but it wasn't all that difficult. It was, instead of having all that wood and those platforms and stairs, there were rocks and twigs and, like a regular hike, like we are used to here. But I thought, how appropriate, because it feels like my life, especially this week, always taking the difficult trail. Like, what is it with me and difficult trails? Like, there's a challenge and I'm going to conquer it. And so this week I decided I was going to mash up two themes because I made this commitment to talk about one of the 12 powers each month this year, and it just wasn't fitting in. And so I'm combining it with one of the five invitations. Really struggled with it this week, yesterday especially. But we're talking about the third invitation from the five invitations. The author, Frank Ostashevsky, ran a hospice center in San Francisco for years. And he learned a lot of lessons by working with the dying. And these five invitations came to him as he was flying somewhere to give a talk. And these are the things that really help us be fully present in life. We've talked about don't wait. We talked about welcome everything. And this week it's about, what is it about? Bring your whole self. Bring your whole self to every situation. Like when we embrace these five invitations, then we are really allowing ourselves to live fully, to live out loud, which is our theme this year, live out loud. Live out loud. So we want to bring our whole self to every situation, not just a role that we play. There was a DEA officer that stopped at a ranch, and he was talking to the rancher, and he said, I'm here to see if you're growing any illegal crops around here, for drugs on this ranch. And the rancher said, okay, but don't go into that field over there. And the DEA officer pulls out his badge. He says, do you see this badge? This badge says I am law and order here, and I go wherever I want. And the rancher said, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead. The next thing you know, you hear this screaming and the DEA officer running and the big angry bull chasing him. And the rancher said, your badge, show him your badge. I love that because he was so wrapped up in his role, the DEA officer, so wrapped up in his role. And we can, all of us in our lives, can get so wrapped up in our roles, in the roles that we play. And we all play multiple roles. In the beginning of this section of the book, Frank says, imagine that you have a big cardboard image of yourself. And it's not just your physical image, but the cardboard also includes all your personality traits, all your character traits. And you put it on a laser cutter, and it's cut into pieces for a jigsaw puzzle. And there's 1,000 pieces, and you've got them scattered on a table, and you start putting together this puzzle that is your image. But you get to a piece that represents maybe some fear. And you decide, I don't want to put that piece in there. And then you get to another piece that maybe represents some insecurity or some anger or some critical part of yourself. And pretty soon you're putting this puzzle all together, and it's just a fragmented image of who you really are. It's not the whole self. And sometimes those characteristics, those parts of ourselves that we don't like, are exactly the part that is needed to be able to relate to someone else, to be able to offer compassion to someone else, to be able to be fully present for someone else that's going through something challenging. It's the very quality that allows us to be with that person at that time. It's part of our wholeness. And without it, we're not complete. Our complete wholeness includes all of that stuff. All of the stuff we don't like, all of the stuff that we'd rather people don't see. It includes all of us. And if we're just one-dimensional, we're not really very interesting, are we? You think about social media and the images that we project of ourselves on social media, and they're mostly our good side, mostly the good pictures that we took of ourselves, not the bad ones, mostly the good things we're doing in our life, the fun things that we're doing in our life. It's not a whole picture of who we are. It's not our wholeness. And it's hard, and maybe, there are people that can really connect on Facebook or YouTube or so some kind of social media, but can you really connect with someone virtually? Can you really have that full connection? We need the whole picture, the whole person. To live fully and to live out loud, we need to bring our whole selves to every experience. And don't miss out on anything, and don't deflect the difficult trails. We often want to deflect the difficulty and go the easy path, take the easy path. But that difficult path has its own blessings that we aren't even aware of until we take it, until we decide. Frank says on page 116, to be whole, we need to include, accept, and connect all parts of ourselves. We need acceptance of our conflicting qualities and the seeming incongruity of our inner and outer worlds. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means no part is left out. Each of us plays multiple roles in our lives. Each of us has lots of different parts. The true self includes all of that. But our roles, when Ram Dass says, don't be a role, be a soul. Be your whole self. Don't be just a part of yourself. Those roles are mostly functional. We get it done. We do something that we feel called to, but it's still only part of us. We have many roles. I'm a minister, I'm a mother, I'm a friend, I'm a wife. There's lots of roles that we all play. But there's more to us than that. There's a lot more to us than that. Unity's second principle says that we are divine beings, that we have the full potential of spirit within us. We don't even realize how glorious we are, how beautiful we are, how divine we are, how much potential we have. And each of us has that. Every one of us in this room has that. Everyone online, you all have that full potential of spirit, and we don't even see it. We see ourselves in segments. We're more focused on the small self and the small stuff that happens to the small self. We don't see the big picture of who we are. We can miss some truly wonderful blessings when we don't bring our whole self, when we deflect the difficult stuff. He says on page 121, when we look only through the lens of a role, it narrows our vision of the world. We don't see things and people as they actually are, but rather project our story onto them. This frequently causes us to attribute a particular significance to an experience and miss the true meaning that is trying to emerge. Miss the true meaning of what is coming for us, the blessing that is there for us. Frank shares a story in this section about a workshop that he was giving in Berlin on grieving and forgiveness. And there were 200 people in the room. It was a pretty big room. And after some time, one woman raised her hand and stood up and said, "I can't forgive. My father was a prisoner in the concentration camps. He was killed by the Nazis, and my heart is like ice." And Frank says he was just silent. He just allowed it. Because what do you say to that? What do you say? There's no fixing that. And not soon long after that, after there was a time of silence, a woman on the other side of the room raised her hand and stood up. "My heart," she said, "is like ice too. My father was a guard in the concentration camp, and I know he killed people, and I can't forgive him." And not long after that, both women walked towards each other to the middle of the room and hugged and held each other. No words were needed. And there was a healing from that because they brought their whole self. They brought it to each other. And there was just this presence of love and this presence of forgiveness. And when we witness something like that, or we hear a story like that, it can open our hearts too. It can allow us healing and forgiveness and love to enter in. He allowed that by just being present. So many times we think words are necessary, and they're not. We just need to be present for people. Allow them to bring their whole selves without us jumping in and trying to fix or help. Just allow them to be. One of the author's friends, Rachel Naomi Remen, says, "When we help, we see life as weak. When we fix, we see life as broken. But when we serve, we see life as whole." That helping and fixing are works of the ego, but serving is work of the soul. Because serving doesn't deplete us, it energizes us. It allows joy and gratitude to step in. Whereas helping and fixing can be exhausting if somebody is not willing to be helped or fixed when we want to help and fix them. We have an opportunity always to just be present, to serve. Each of us has within us an inner teacher. We talk about this in the spiritual direction program that I was in, that everyone has their own inner teacher. And as a spiritual director, we don't have to do anything except bear witness, to allow them to let that inner teacher come forth to guide them. It's beautiful if we can let ourselves, as the spiritual director, get out of the way and just let it happen. And we can do that too. Each one of us can do that for other people. We can just bear witness. To be present is probably the best gift that we can give someone, to listen and to trust, and allowing them to bring their whole self so that we can bring our whole selves, because when we're sitting with someone, it's going to bring up stuff in us. And it does. And then allowing that. Life asks of us to constantly adapt. It can be exhausting. But we have this ability within us, this power of order within us. That is our ability to adjust, to reprioritize, to order, to put things right. And we all need that order when life throws us curveballs, because it always will. It's one thing we can count on, that things are not going to go as planned all the time, most of the time. So the power of order is this foundation underneath our desire for spiritual growth, our ability to make something happen, to create. Divine order is, in Unity, we teach that it's mind, idea, expression. It's how things are created in mind and then in our physical world. How things are created. And when someone says, oh, it's all in divine order, a lot of times I don't know what they mean. I'm not going to presume I know what they mean, but a lot of times I hear when someone says it's all in divine order means this was supposed to happen this way. That is not a Unity teaching. That is not Unity teaching. We don't teach that things are supposed to happen a certain way, or that there's some God pulling the strings and making sure something happens regardless of what choices we make in our life. That's not a Unity teaching. Divine order is our ability to do this in our own consciousness, that we have control of our thoughts, of our emotions, of our beliefs. And so we create, we sort out, we make things right. Sharon Conner says in Adventures in Resilience, divine order is a sorting out kind of energy that focalizes right outcomes, right action, right thinking, right emotions. It writes whatever needs writing. It is the idea of harmonious progress. It is the innate urge to grow always towards a more balanced and happy life. Most of us want a more balanced and happy life, don't we? We want that. We want that. And we have the ability to put things in order for ourselves, to see with new eyes, to calm the inner critic. Yesterday, as I was working on this, I was really struggling. I was not using my power of order very well, not from a Christ consciousness anyway. And I got a text message or a message on Facebook Messenger from Reverend Jackie Fernandez, and she's here today, and she said, I'm going to be at your service. Jackie, you may remember her. She was here in 2015. Some of you, she helped me do our first alternative service, and she said she was coming, and my stuff got really worked up. Really worked up. I was in the middle of it. My inner critic was all over me, and I said, it'd be wonderful to see you. Oh, I wish I had a better talk for you coming. And she was so gracious and said, I've got your back. Spirit's got your back. And Spirit does have our back. God does have our back always. Always. But that inner critic can be mean, and it can really stop us from putting our whole selves forward. So one of the things that the author talks about in this section is the inner critic. And I know my life, I've been looking at my life this week. There's been a lot of tears. Working with the power of order and realizing my life is not in balance. I love this job. I love this community. And my life is not in balance. I'm putting way too much emphasis. I didn't think I'd cry. I should have known. Way too much emphasis on my work, which I love, and not enough on my family, on my husband, my marriage, my friends. I need to bring my whole self to those other parts of my life because it's important. Each of us needs that. We need that. And I don't know how this will happen yet, and that's okay, because Spirit has this. God has this. Thank you. Oh, I don't think I need this many. I hope not. So one of the things that I just discovered this week, Martha Creek recommended a book called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. And he's a psychiatrist that developed a model called the internal family systems. Some of you may be familiar with it. That inside of us, we have this family of parts. And there are no bad parts. It's just like our outer families. We don't always like all of those parts, all of those family members. We don't always like it, and we try to push them away, and we make them bad, and we don't accept them. And I just started reading this book, so I'll probably have more on it later on. But instead of pushing those parts down, letting them come, and letting them express, and letting them tell you where they came from. Because most of them are very young, these parts that we don't want, the critics, the parts that we don't accept of ourselves, the protectors. They were mostly very young. And we just have to love them anyway. Because he says that if we can love them, if we can give them space, if we can allow them to be, that our biggest critic can become our biggest cheerleader. It's a part of ourself that can transform. And who wouldn't want that? How many of you have an inner critic? Would you rather have a cheerleader? They can transform. He talks about how Jesus demonstrated this in the outer world by going to those who were sinners or tax collectors or adulteresses or sick. And metaphysically, that's what he's telling us to do. Is to go inside to those parts of ourselves, because we have them all. We have them all in our wholeness. We may not want to admit it, but we have them all. And go to those parts and allow them to heal. It's a tall order. We need to make adjustments within, though. When things go wonky on the outside, it's probably because something's going wonky on the inside. But we have the ability to adjust. This morning I was driving here, and there was a race going on all the roads I would take to get here. And I had to keep turning around and trying to find, I kept thinking I'd get behind the race to get on I-25 to get here. And finally I just okay, I'm just gonna go a whole different way. There are many paths to this center. Just as there are many paths to the center within us. There are many paths. We just have to make adjustments when things aren't in right order. And we have that opportunity more than we would like. More than we would like. Okay, I wasn't going to mention this but we watched a movie on Friday, and it was so good. It's called Operation Mincemeat. Anyone seen it? It's on Netflix. It's about it's a true story. Most of it is true, they said, when I always check it out afterwards. But it's about the Allies' deception plan to fool the Nazis so that they could invade Sicily in 1943. And it's really far-fetched. Like, you think this can't even be real, but it is. It's real. And I would encourage you to watch it because it's really well done, and I won't give it away. But what they had this plan and they hatched this plan, but after the plan was in motion, they had to keep adjusting. They had to keep changing course. This happens, now we got to do this. Then we got to do this. That's our power of order. Our ability to change course, our ability to adjust, our ability to rewrite things when they're not going right. We have that ability. Are you ready to do that? To stop deflecting the difficulty and just adjust, to rebalance? I am. I don't know how I'm going to get there yet, but I am. Just allow whatever's emerging to emerge. Because we all deserve that. Deserve that happy and balanced life. You deserve it. Don't miss anything. Don't miss out on life. Don't miss out on the full life that you deserve. Live out loud. Live out loud and bring your whole self. Namaste. Peace be with you.